So right here in front of me, I've got every single iPad from Apple's current iPad lineup. We've got the 10.2-inch iPad for $329. We've got the iPad Mini 5 for $400, the iPad Air 3 for $500, and the 2020 iPad Pro for $800. So in this video, I'm going to show you guys all of the differences between them and then give you my personal recommendations on which iPad you should be buying for your specific use case. Now, a lot of things have changed since I made the last version of this video on April 5th of last year, especially the introduction of iPadOS, and most importantly, the addition of cursor support only a couple of weeks ago. But before I get into that, let's go through all of the physical differences between these iPads. The iPad Pro is the only one that's moved over to the new modern design, which includes square edges compared to the other iPad's classic chamfered edges, a display with rounded corners compared to square corners on the other iPads, and even bezels all around thanks to the Face ID authentication sensor, compared to the other iPads which have large bezels on the top and bottom because they still pack the classic Touch ID home button. And on the back, the Pro looks quite a bit different as well, with a much larger camera bump than the rest. Now in 2020, the iPad mini is the only one that doesn't get Apple Smart Connector, which is used to connect keyboard cases without requiring batteries, which makes sense because it's so much smaller than the rest. The iPad Pro is also the only iPad that gets 4 speakers, 2 on the top and 2 on the bottom, and this makes a huge difference as you'll hear in the sound comparison. The Pro is also the only iPad that gets a USB-C port, making it much more simple to transfer files and connect devices. Transferring files is still possible with the Lightning port that comes on the rest of the iPads, but it's just not as convenient. The Pro also comes with a faster 18-watt USB-C charger compared to 12 watts on the others. However, it doesn't get a headphone jack because Apple wanted to make it thinner. And yes, it's crazy thin compared to the rest, but it can actually bend if you're not careful with it, unlike the other iPads. Moving on to display differences, the new Air and Mini have literally identical displays, but the Mini packs basically the same amount of pixels into a smaller display, so it has the highest pixels per inch out of the whole iPad lineup, including the Pro. And it also comfortably fits in one hand, so it's the lightest and most portable out of all of these. The iPad Pro has basically the same display as the Air, but it's better in 2 ways. A higher 600 nits of brightness compared to 500, and the addition of ProMotion technology. This basically means that it has a 120Hz refresh rate display, but it also has the added advantage of being able to automatically adjust down to as low as 24Hz to match the content you're viewing, which helps save battery life. You can see the difference in fluidity in this slow motion clip between the Air's 60Hz display and 120Hz on the Pro. This also greatly reduces the lag on the Apple Pencil, improving the drawing and note-taking experience thanks to the 120Hz display. Speaking of the Apple Pencil, the Pro is the only one that supports this second version, which is quite a bit better because it magnetically attaches to the side, instantly pairs, and wirelessly charges. The other iPads only support the original Apple Pencil, which you have to plug into the Lightning port to charge. The new Pencil 2 also has a new double tap feature which is used to swap between tools in various applications. Back to the displays, the budget 10.2-inch iPad is the only one that doesn't get a very high quality display. It's still decent, but it doesn't match the rest. First off, it's not fully laminated, which basically means that unlike the rest, the display and the top cover glass are 2 separate pieces. This leads to it looking a bit gray, lacking deep blacks like the rest, and there's a gap between the display and the glass, which is noticeable from an angle. It's also the only one that doesn't come with an anti-reflective coating, so you'll notice reflections a lot more, and it only packs about 450 nits of brightness compared to 500 and 600 on the others. It also doesn't get P3 wide color gamut like you get on the other iPads, which makes for a very color accurate display. So as you can see, the 10.2-inch iPad is lacking in the display department. Now let's get into comparing the speakers between these iPads. They all sound pretty decent, but the Pro speakers are by far the best because you get them on both the top and the bottom, which is great for gaming and watching movies. Now before we get into performance, let's quickly compare the cameras. The Pro gets a 12 megapixel wide camera compared to an 8 megapixel wide camera on the rest of the iPads, so it's gonna have a lot more detail. It's also the only one that comes with a 10 megapixel ultra wide camera, which gives you a unique perspective that you can't get on the other iPads. It's also the only one that can shoot 4K 60 FPS video on either of the cameras, compared to only 1080p 30 video on the other iPads. On the front side, the budget iPad only gets a 1.2 megapixel camera compared to 7 on the rest, so selfies will look quite a bit worse, especially compared to the iPad Pro, which also has portrait mode thanks to the Face ID sensors. The iPad Pro also gets 5 microphones instead of 2 on the other iPads, so it sounds much better as well. This is the microphone quality on the 10.2-inch iPad. This is the microphone quality on the iPad mini. This is the microphone quality on the iPad Air. This is the microphone quality on the 2020 iPad Pro. And what's brand new this year is the LiDAR scanner, which greatly improves depth tracking for things like augmented reality. Here it is compared to the iPad Air, which doesn't have LiDAR. As you can see, it's able to detect objects and distance much more accurately. Now let's finally get into performance. The Pro gets twice as much RAM compared to the other iPads, so that will help with productivity apps and multitasking. The Air and Mini share the same A12 chip, while the 10.2-inch iPad gets a very outdated A10 chip from the iPhone 7, and the Pro gets the latest A12Z chip. Comparing multi-core performance in Geekbench 5, the Pro is the clear leader, with the budget iPad being way behind the rest. The Air and Mini are basically identical because they both use the same chip. In the metal test, we see basically the same thing as before, with the Pro having a massive advantage in graphics performance. And here are the scores in Antutu's 3D benchmark, so this shows a good rundown on the performance differences between these iPads. Now in terms of gaming, the iPad Pro is by far the best choice because it has a 120Hz display, allowing you to play at up to 120 FPS in games like Fortnite. The rest of the iPads can only run games at 60 FPS, and since the budget iPad isn't as powerful, Fortnite actually limits it to 30 FPS. Out of all of them, the iPad mini is by far the most comfortable to hold while gaming, but if you like to play using a controller, it shouldn't matter much. Now let's quickly mention some other spec differences before I start recommending which iPad you should buy. The budget iPad gets Bluetooth 4.2 compared to 5.0 on the other iPads, and the 2020 iPad Pro is now the first iPad ever to support Wi-Fi 6. Another difference is that the budget iPad only has the first generation of Touch ID compared to second gen on the iPad Air and Mini. And as for battery life, they're all rated for the same 10 hours. And one final difference is the keyboard case support. All iPads except for the iPad mini are gonna support the upcoming smart connector keyboard cases with built-in trackpads for the new cursor support that works incredibly well and basically helps make an iPad a pretty decent laptop replacement. The 10.2-inch iPad and iPad Air 3 get the Logitech Combo Touch, which is priced at $150. But the iPad Pro actually gets the new Magic Keyboard case, which costs $300, but has a number of advantages. It features a USB-C port with pass-through charging, meaning that the main port is essentially freed up for things like connecting storage drives and other devices. It's also the first keyboard case that actually floats the iPad in the air, closer to you, making it more convenient to touch, while also providing the same great Magic Key switches that came with the 16-inch MacBook Pro. Now with all of that said and compared, let's get into my purchasing recommendations for which iPad you should buy, starting with who should buy the 10.2-inch budget iPad and why. If you're buying an iPad for a child, you should probably go with the budget iPad. It's going to be good enough for them to listen to music, watch Netflix, and play basic games. Chances are they won't really mind the lower performance or the worse quality display, and if they drop it and crack the screen, it's cheaper to replace since it's non-laminated. And for adults, it's by far the cheapest way to get an iPad with a trackpad keyboard case. This is great for someone who needs a cheaper laptop replacement for doing things like browsing the web, using common apps like QuickBooks, and typing documents and other business-related tasks. Now, if you're buying an iPad for a teenager, chances are they'll appreciate the extra performance of the A12 chip in both the iPad mini and the iPad Air, as they'll perform much better for gaming. These iPads are also great for those who really care about display quality for things like watching Netflix, and especially for those who want to use their Apple Pencil to draw with their iPad. I'd say the Mini is more for those who would rather save $100 instead of having the ability to use it with a keyboard case. And of course, those who don't mind the smaller display size. Now the Air is for people who want a premium iPad that works as a laptop replacement and has extra power to make sure all of those apps work quickly and very reliably, especially while multitasking. The only limitation is the Lightning port, which makes it difficult to connect storage devices for file transfers. And that's where the iPad Pro comes in, with its USB-C port, which is by far the best case scenario for being a laptop replacement. The Pro is for someone who wants the absolute best iPad experience you can get, regardless of the price. The incredible performance, the 6 gigs of RAM, and the 120Hz display make it by far the snappiest tablet out there, whether you're using it for gaming, drawing with the Apple Pencil 2, or for productivity work like video or photo editing. The Pro is for those who are initially considering an Apple MacBook but would rather have the thin, lightweight, and portable design of the iPad Pro instead. It's got top-of-the-line specs like Wi-Fi 6, it's got the best cameras, speakers, and microphones for those who care about them. And it's also the most future-proof by packing the new LiDAR scanner for those who are interested in augmented reality. The choice you make really depends on what you're going to be doing with your iPad, and in many cases, paying the extra price is worth it because you don't want to be stuck with a budget 10.2-inch iPad if you're trying to play Fortnite competitively. And on the flip side, you don't need to buy the iPad Pro if all you're going to be using it for is watching Netflix and scrolling through Facebook. Basically, a good rule of thumb is to choose the iPad you buy wisely based on what you can expect to do with it a year from today. So hopefully this video helps you make a decision, and if you've made up your mind, we'll have links to all of these iPads down in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, tap like and click the circle above to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.